Okay, so welcome to the additional video on finding the circumcenter of a triangle using coordinates. All right, so I've picked some coordinates that lead us to a little bit simpler math just to kind of emphasize this process, all right? You should expect to get numbers that are not quite as nice as this, but I want to focus in on the process of what we're doing, all right? So again, you got to understand that a circumcenter is when you have a triangle, the point at which you can draw a circle around the triangle, and the vertices of the triangle will connect to the circle at those 3 points, making the distance to each of those vertices equal to each other, because those would be all radii of the circle. All right, so in order to do that, the circumcenter is found by the intersection of the perpendicular bisectors of each side. So understanding that perpendicular bisectors intersecting will give you the circumcenter leads you to what we're going to do. We need to find the perpendicular line that bisects the side. So let's start with the midpoint, because that's where the perpendicular bisector will cross. So we're not actually going to do all 3 of these. You only need to do 2. The third one will go through the same point. So let's just look at AB. All right, so the midpoint of AB is going to be -2 plus 2 over 2. And we go with 0 plus 8 over 2. So that gets us, the midpoint is 0, 4. And if we look at BC, we get 2 plus 7 over 2, and we get 8 plus 3 over 2. So that gets us, BC is going to give me 9 halves and 11 halves. Okay, so let's do our slope. All right, so the slope of AB will be equal to 0 minus 8 over -2 minus 2. So that's going to give me a -8 over -4, which will give me a +2. The slope of BC is going to be 8 minus 3 over 2 minus 7, which will give me a 5 over -5, which gives me a -1. So the perpendicular aspect is we'll just take the slope of the line of each of those sides and we'll flip it and switch it to a different side. So positive becomes negative. Reciprocal of 2 is 1/2. The reciprocal of -1 is +1. And then we'll just take those and we'll plug them into our point slope formula. So you find the midpoint, you find the perpendicular slope, and you plug it in. So y minus 4 equals -1/2. Sorry, I made a mistake there. It is y minus y. So hold on one second. So we end up with y minus, that was correct, y minus 4 equals -1/2 x minus 0. We simplify that and we get y minus 4 equals -1/2. We'll just bring that down here to show you the work. And we'll leave off the 0. We're just going to add 4. So we end up with y equals -1/2 x plus 4. The second equation, we're going to go ahead and we'll do y minus 11 halves is equal to 1 times x minus 9 halves. So if we distribute that 1, we get y minus 11 halves equal to x minus 9 halves. So if we add 11 halves to both, that gets us to a nice 2 halves, which is a nice 1. So we'll say y equals x plus 1. Okay, so now that we have both of our equations, it's just a matter now of giving ourselves some space here, and we're going to solve a system. All right, so once you get your two equations, you're just going to solve a system. And since they're both in y equals form, we're just going to set them equal to each other. So negative 1/2 x plus 4 equals x plus 1. So we want to get our x's to one side and our y's to the other. So if we add 1/2 x to both and I subtract 1 from both, I end up with 3 equal to 3 over 2x. So we'll multiply each one by 2/3. And we end up with 2 equal to x. Now that we have our x value, we can plug that back in and get our y value. So y equals 2 plus 1, so y equals 3. So the circumcenter of these 3 points is 2, 3. Okay, not a bad problem. Okay, not a bad process. Again, I mentioned that in the video earlier. The process is not that bad. You can get a little bit tricky equations. So you need to watch your algebra. You need to make sure you're doing that correctly. But follow this process and you can find the circumcenter. All right, let me know if you have questions.